Monica Corningstone.
And I'm Ron Burgundy. Go fuck yourself, San Diego.
Ron Burgundy. This is one of the funniest movies that are out there. I love Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell can do anything and I'd laugh. Anchorman. The thing is, and the joke with that, is that early on they made the point that said it, Ron Burgundy repeats any and everything that you write on the teleprompter. So whatever you write on a teleprompter, Ron Burgundy is going to read it. That's who Ron Burgundy is. Joe Biden had a Ron Burgundy moment. And I'm going to do this video in the context of a sinking and cratering president that can't necessarily seem to get anything right. And it is showing in the way that the public basically views that one and same Joe Biden. At a point in time where the president of the United States should have been injected with something that would get his energy level up to a 20, he's usually at a 4. But for a moment where sacred cow of the Democratic Party, something that they fought for, they say they believed in, they're basically the only party, we only have 2, that basically represents that particular issue, that strongly represents that issue. So much so that an anti-choice Democrat is a very rare thing. It's a very rare thing. And I think it should be a rare thing if that's the issue that you believe in. And I have zero issue with setting standards in regards to low levels where the party will go. Meaning, beyond this point, you will never get a particular vote from X or from Y. Abortion should be one of those issues. Supreme Court strikes down abortion, Roe v. Wade. Something that should have been codified into law for decades, struck it down. The president of the U.S., who is a Democrat, who is now the person who has to basically fight for this issue, despite the fact that he was about to appoint a judge that was against pro-choice. Biden was about to do that. But then this ruling came out. And so now the president had to enunciate, has to get across the rage and the outrage and discuss, and not even just discuss, just this idea and perception of self in regards to a country. Meaning, in the same way you have your individual conception of who you are, you also have a conception of what your country is. I mean, why do you think Brits walk around with their head up like that? They used to own 50% of the globe, and it hasn't necessarily entirely sunk in that that is no longer the Britain, but whatever. I'm making the point that in the way you see yourself, there's also a way that you basically view your country. It is going to be different from person to person, but that view is there nonetheless. It's like this esoteric shape that is kind of in your mind. And I think for a lot of people, it is very hard to reconcile this notion that you have gone backwards as a country, decisively backwards on an issue that up until this point was basically settled ground. It's a woman's choice. A woman should have a choice what she wants to do with her body, period. Mic drop, end of sentence, everybody exit the place, the premises. That is no longer true in nearly half of the United States. And all of those women are basically stuck in Republican territory without the ability of choice, without the ability to choose whether or not she wants to have a kid, for God's sake. And again, those places are not going to give any support at the point where the kid is basically born. The president of the United States is the person at this point, because of his party choice, that has come out and enunciate that outrage that all of these people are basically feeling, and not just enunciate it, do something that is muscular. Muscular to the degree that his shirt would literally pop off of his chest like the Incredible Hulk. And to my point, anything that the president does at this moment will be acceptable. Anything. Even if it's something that the courts will basically roll back. And the reason I say that is because the overwhelming majority of the country believes this country should have a choice, meaning women should have a choice. And because you get the overwhelming majority of the country, and you are going to get 98% of your party, that's what you should do. It is allowed in this moment. Be the, maniac in this case, where you're at the podium. And I'm not saying you need to start screaming. The thing with the 10-year-old rape victim was great. But there needs to be a bit of rage and muscular action to go along with it. Because if the people, the public, your own supporters, can't look at you and see how they feel emulated in you, they're going to think less of you. Meaning you're going to demoralize your party that much further if you cannot articulate the rage, anger, disgust, this feeling of indignation that your country is going backwards. You need to be able to get that across somehow. And if you can't, you will suffer as a result of that. Those people will think less of you. They would think less of the party if you can't do that. And the fact that this sacred cow is basically being killed on your watch, which you standing there entirely impotent to do anything about it, that doesn't look good. That doesn't look good. Joe Biden gave his speech. And again, the speech wasn't necessarily horrible when he signed his executive order. And again, the executive order is so hazy and subjective, who the hell knows what it does? Again, it's all posturing. People don't want posturing. People want muscular action from the government, specifically the president of the United States and his female vice president. Muscular action. That was not this. And then you had the indignity of the Ron Burgundy moment. Ron Burgundy moment.
Power. It is noteworthy that the percentage of women who register to vote and cast a ballot is consistently higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. Women are not without electoral and or political or women are not without electoral and or political or maybe precise, not and or political power. That's another way of saying that you, the women of America, can determine the outcome of this issue. I don't think the court.
Let's do that one more time.
Women higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. Higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. Than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line. Women are not.
He's reading the teleprompter. And at the point where it says end of quote, his intellectual faculty is basically just off. Just off. And so he reads, end of quote. Repeat the line. And then he repeats the line. He doesn't notice. They shot your sacred cow in the face. They shot it in the face. You can't fuck that up like that. You can't fuck that up. You can't do that. You can't do that. And so polling comes out. Polling comes out. What do you think? What do you think Joe Biden's approval rating is at this point with everything that has basically befallen this country? And by the way, Joe Biden can take a maximalist position. Look at us. Maximalist position on Ukraine, where he basically comes out and says, I don't give a shit about what American households are feeling. I don't care. We must win in Ukraine. We must win in Ukraine. If American households need to have excessive energy bills, if they can't feed their kids because of the cost of food, if they're going to have a difficult time going on vacation, or for that matter, just keeping the lights on and out, then that's what needs to be done. Ukraine matters that much more. If that is not a maximalist position, I don't know what is. Short of a third world war, Joe Biden has basically just said, we are going to have suffering for as long as it takes in order to beat Putin in Ukraine, a country that most Americans didn't even think about up to this point. And for that matter, I would argue, shouldn't care about one way or the other. Shouldn't care about. Especially in the context of their own physical needs. And now they're talking about manufacturing basically taking a hit in this country as a result of Mr. Biden. Let's hear what he says on Ukraine.
This week, you and the G7 allies introduced a plan for an oil price cap for Russian exports, which is not yet filled out, and obviously is a response to the high price of gasoline in the United States and around the world. Are you confident that that cap would bring down prices for American drivers? And how long is it fair to expect American drivers to continue to pay a premium because of this war?
Let me hear this. The second part of the question was, would it bring down the price?
Will it bring down prices? And the war has pushed prices up. They could go as high as $200 a barrel, some analysts think. How long is it fair to expect American drivers and drivers around the world to pay that premium for this war?
As long as it takes. So Russia cannot, in fact, defeat Ukraine and move beyond Ukraine.
As long as it takes. As long as it takes. You will bear the burden for as long as it takes. This is my name. My name is Joe Biden. That is the policy. The American public don't give a shit about Ukraine, especially in the context of their own physical needs. And if they're taking a hit to manufacturing, if they have to pay more for food, which they are, if they have to pay more for gas, which they are, they're going to look at the president of the United States and that particular policy. They're going to look at him saying, I don't give a shit about you. Ukraine is the most important thing in the world. And while they are struggling and suffering, the president cares more about Ukraine than he cares about his own government. That soaks into the bloodstream of the population as they see the president saying stuff like this, while simultaneously taking weak positions on things that they actually care about. That looks bad. That looks horrendous. People are paying $5 a gallon for gas. That is when it's typically $2 something. That is a tax on all of those people. Think about what that means for manufacturing. To get goods from point A to point B, that goes up. To run your machinery, that goes up. The energy that it costs to basically just do anything goes up. You have to pay all of that. And why? Because he decided he wanted to have an economic war. The public, whether the public understands chapter and verse about Ukraine, whether they understand that the U.S. knocked over the Ukrainian government, putting that specific government in place that allows, not the Zelensky government, but putting the other government in place that took over, meaning the coup government, meaning you basically overthrew a country, called it a revolution, And the Nazis that basically assisted you in doing that gets infused into the army and the military. And the government itself, Russophobic to the hilt, you're basically controlling that government. Meaning you installed a government on the Russian border that was Russophobic. That is astonishingly bad. And if that is not a provocation, I don't know what the hell a provocation is. You did that. You chose to do that. That wasn't stuff that was just magically done. That wasn't cosmic. That was force of will. You didn't like the fact that Yanukovych wouldn't necessarily turn over his government to the West. So you got rid of the guy who wouldn't do what you wanted him to do. It's that simple. This is the issue of power. And in this particular case, that power has run up against another power that is not in line with what the Western powers were basically trying to do. Whether they were trying to do it on purpose, whether they were trying to do it in this kind of just, unconscious objective, I don't know what it is. But if you are surrounding Russia with NATO, then you are surrounding Russia with NATO. It is a military organization. I guess the point that I'm making here is sometimes when I'm getting into arguments with people who are pro-NATO, and you're kind of pointing out like, dude, you're surrounding a country with a military organization. Are you telling me that the United States would accept Mexico being overthrown with a pro-Russian government that turns around and puts weapons and whatnot into Mexico? Are you insane? Do you honestly believe the United States will be okay with that? That is literally what you're doing with NATO. And they would say, but we're not trying to start a war. We're flowers and rainbows. We're just, protecting ourselves, that any country is sovereign and can do what any country wants to do. So if Mexico decides they want to orient themselves and putting weapons and everything else in, they're okay with that? No, they should do that. That's provocation. So if China is getting into a relationship with the Solomon Islands, no, that's a provocation too. You can't do that. So the rules-based order is that basically you can surround whoever the hell that you want. You can knock over whatever government you want, and the rest of the world should be okay with that. But the moment that the rest of the world come up with their own relationships, if it in any way challenges or offsets what you're trying to do, then that is against the rules-based order. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Here's the catch. The people in America don't give a shit about that stuff, though. So even if they accept your framing of what is going on in Ukraine, they are not going to care about it in the context of their own personal and physical material need. And the fact that they see you radically weak on the issues that they care about on top of that, meaning you're putting them in pain and you're weak. Yeah, that's not going to work. That doesn't work as a president. I'm telling you, that doesn't work in any political context, anywhere around the world. Just human beings dealing with a situation like that and a leader like that, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So what is Joe Biden's approval rating? Because if I'm right, his approval rating should be in the dumps. And here we are, 29%. Joe Biden is below 30% approval. Below 30% approval. That is a number that Donald Trump never even reached. That is a number that Donald Trump never reached. Donald Trump got hundreds of thousands of people killed from COVID on his watch at the beginning of that disease as it took place. He was comically ridiculous and inept in pretty much everything that he did. And yet, in this situation, Biden is worse. Because the reality of it is, Donald Trump never did anything that had adverse consequences, overtly so, to the people of the United States. Yeah, he started a trade war with China, and that affected the farmers and whatnot. But that is a specific slice of America. What Joe Biden is doing is affecting all of America. And not just all of America, the rest of the world. Because many of those countries cannot afford the cost of oil that basically, because of the prices, basically shot up. Grain is not going into certain countries, so there's famine. So because these guys had grandiose ideas, didn't necessarily want to accept any kind of security arrangement of Europe, taking a maximalist position on everything, despite the fact behind the scenes that what Putin was asking for, they had already said they were going to agree to. They just didn't want to say it openly. So purely for the point of politics, just politics alone, the world gets adversely affected. And the people in those various countries, the leaders, are suffering in Europe as a result of that, because whatever we're dealing with here in the United States, it is worse than Europe. It is worse. They're talking about energy rationing. They're talking about industries shutting down in various places. Germany doesn't even know if it can keep the lights on. Russian gas is basically going to stop tomorrow. France is going to take a hit for that. Because how are we going to keep the lights on? What, 17% of Russian gas goes into France? I think France had the highest amount of Russian gas in 2022. Okay, how are you going to keep the lights on when it stops? But that's in Europe. And I strongly suspect that there's going to be political turmoil every bit as much as here in the United States, because they're not going to want to have to deal with a worse situation that we're dealing with. Meaning, if we're looking at Joe Biden like this, how do you think they're looking at their leaders abroad when their situation is basically worse? And in the same way that Joe Biden spent all of this focus and time on Ukraine, they've spent all this time and focus on Ukraine. Also, they're going to suffer political consequences. Here in the United States, though, 29%. 29%. God damn, that's insane. When it broke down by age, 20%, 18 to 34. 27%, 35 to 49. 50 to 64, 33%. 65 and older, they're out to lunch. But even them recognize this guy is just horrible. Non-graduates, 27. Basically, all of these guys basically agree. All of them agree. Male and female. More females still like him, but not so much. Democrats, 63% approve. 63% approve. Think about how demoralized you have to be for a party to look at the person who's in charge, that's your guy, and you're looking at him like, oh, God. Can that number dip below 50%? Well, maybe. We'll keep it up. Independents are at 19. Republicans are at 1%. 1%. Republicans are at 1%. How do you get to 1%? Oh, God. And African Americans, God bless you. God bless you. 55%. God fucking bless you. African Americans, 55%, holding the line. Holding the line. You should not be holding the line. You should not be holding the line. You should not be holding the line. I get it. How do you keep the monsters at bay? And even that guy who's drowning is the guy who's standing there. He's fingering it in the dike. How do you keep the monsters at bay? But think for the moment of all the things that you want politically. What do you want in regards to your world? The woke left gets it wrong. They radically get it wrong. I understand where they're coming from, but they're wrong in the way that they express that stuff. The objective is not to put somebody in a position just because they're black, white, gay, straight, missing a leg, whatever. That's not the point. And it's certainly not to celebrate it in these kind of weird terms of like, yes, I had a short list and I used this black woman who was on a short list to put into the thing. So you basically use affirmative action for your vice president and for your Supreme Court pick. Yes. And you believe that that is somehow a good thing. I don't care if you put a black person in a position. You should put black people in a position. You should put whoever. But the point is to get to a point where that is not necessarily overtly stated, it's just understood as normal. Meaning Lieutenant Uhura doesn't spend all of her time having episodes about her being black and what it feels like to be black on a Starflight ship. Because at that point, it is just understood. It is like lungs to air, that that person belongs there. They can do the job. Doesn't matter about their color, race, sexuality, any of that stuff. That person is competent, capable, to do the job. End of story. You don't have to entirely overtly celebrate it. If this was the 60s, fair enough. This is not the 60s. At this point, what matters more is what do they do, not what they look like. If you want to put a white woman in as vice president, I'm fine with that, as long as I can get Medicare for all. If you want to put a person who's Korean in as vice president, I'm fine with that, as long as I get Medicare for all. I'll get my point. It's the policy that affects a population that looks a particular way. Medicare for all basically will help the person at the bottom who can't necessarily afford the health care. So by definition of the policy, you've basically helped all of these people who are in dire economic straits. And many of those people are going to look like me. I don't care if you put a Korean woman in as vice president, as long as they get Medicare for all. The point is the policy. That's the point what I'm getting at. As African Americans, as you're looking at this, they're giving you shiny objects in lieu of the actual policy. And I'm saying the shiny object should be insufficient in regards to how you evaluate a particular party or a particular person. That's what I'm getting at. It's not about the way the person looks. Yes, you want people of color in these various capacities and everything else. Yes, diversity is a damn good thing because we have a diverse society. Perfect, agreed. But that's not the end all be all. It's what they do. It's what they do. The woke left gets it wrong because they overtly celebrate that stuff as if it's some kind of anomaly, some kind of weird thing that this black person, gay person, straight person, whatever, is in a particular position. And I'm saying the way to do that is to put the person in the position and allow the person to do their job with those attributes. You don't have to hit people over the head with it. In fact, hitting people over the head where it makes it worse. Looking normal is better. Looking normal is better. And again, the focus should be on policy, not these shiny objects. You should have issues with this party. You should take serious issues since the things that you actually care about and that you want them to do, they are not doing. And in lieu of doing those things, giving you this diversity stuff. But God bless you, you're holding the line. Fair enough. Let's keep going. In all of these states, with the exception of Hawaii, Vermont, and barely, look at that, 40%. And let's look at the top from where it started. All right, so let's see. This is back in 1/22/2021, 48%, and let's keep going. All right, approve, disapprove, proof, disapprove. All right, ooh, getting worse, getting worse. What is this? Infrastructure bill signed, and he's at 36%. Russia invasion of Ukraine is still ticking down. Wow. Aspire for peace. How can we organize in ways to challenge boundaries and defy exclusion? That is a damn good question, Aspire for peace, and I honestly don't know. And I am somewhat cynical on this stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm optimistic in the long term, but I don't see an out. I mean, you tell me. It looks like it's a magical door. Like, I see no magical doors. I'll put it that way. I see no magical doors. I mean, play it out. What happens in the midterms? Let's say the Republicans take the House and the Senate. Nothing is going to get done at all. I mean, whatever they agree upon is not going to be something that either the Democratic Party and damn sure not the left is going to want. Let's say it's divided where Republicans get one, Democrats get the other. Again, nothing gets done. Nothing. Meaning, in every situation that presents itself, nothing gets done, with one exception. If Democrats ends up taking more seats because people basically want to get abortion passed, okay. But are they really going to do anything real in any other issue? Like, that's what I'm getting at. And I got to be honest, I don't see the situation where Democrats take it like that. A president with a 30 or 29% approval rating is not going to have a party that is all that energized in order to do anything else. The party is utterly and entirely demoralized. The figurehead of that party is doing stuff like that. So, look, I don't have an answer for it in the context of like this kind of how do you mobilize in order to get X or Y done. From my standpoint, this stuff is mechanical. Like, I don't look at it as people have choice or will. I look at it as things degrade to a point where the amount of energy just to keep things going is more than the amount of energy to change things. Meaning things are so bad that the population is so angry and beaten down that they can no longer keep the system going in the way that the system is going, in which case they rise up and they change it to something else. None of that is a good process. All the stuff is unpredictable at that point. I guess the point that I'm making here is, though, I don't know how you do anything beyond that. I could be wrong. I get that cynical. And, you know, I think Chris Hedges or somebody like that would say movements. Fair enough. But I would make the point of saying those movements usually form when things get so bad that the people can't tolerate the current living situation where they basically do something to change it. And that stuff takes a amount of energy. It takes a certain amount of energy just to keep the system going the way it is. People have to deal with certain damage, homelessness, cops shooting people, and everything else. That's stuff that people basically accept. When does it get to the point where it's so bad that the energy it takes to change it becomes less than basically keeping things the way they are? That I don't know. That I don't know. Roe v. Wade is what Democrats are running on, not just reps. AJC, yes, that is basically what they're going to be running on. I think, to me, the issue is the economy. Yes, agreed. Republicans are running on the economy. And guess which one is going to win? Guess which one is going to win? It's the economy, stupid. It is the economy, stupid. That is basically what is going to come out. But we'll see. I'm very skeptical that this is going to be enough of an issue to overcome the perception of Democrats, and for that matter, the perception of their president. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I am going to say subscribe. Thanks all. AJC, yeah. It's the economy. It's always going to be the economy. People care about their personal needs first. People care about their personal needs first. And honest to God, man, if Donald Trump gets on that stage and starts to make an issue out of the money that we've been sending to Ukraine, oh my God. Look, I've been to California and I've been in DC. And even though they may not show it on television, in the real world, physical matter reality where you're dealing with people, they are aghast that we've sent that much money to Ukraine. That we've sent more money, almost as much, as the entire Russian military, or Russia spends on their military. Think about that. That's the amount of money we've sent, $50 billion. People were asking for their college loans to be done away with, something that the president could do with the flip of a pen. But that's no. $50 billion to Ukraine, yes. Hey, what about getting rid of homelessness in the U.S.? That's no. $50 billion to Ukraine. You think that the population is okay with that? They don't see that, and that doesn't aggrieve the shit out of them? That you can, bam, on a whim, their needs get ignored. Those needs, your grandiose idea of the world as a chessboard, that you attend to. That bites. The first person who's running in a race that brings that up will get support from a shitload of people. If that person is Donald Trump, it would give permission for every other Republican to start using that as an attack point against Democrats, and it will be brutal. Because the fact of the matter is the argument is correct, and it's an argument that basically everybody feels. And when you're going to add that to this kind of attack on the economy, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. That attack is devastating because I have a hard time believing that the people in the country look at this situation and think they're okay with this. I don't think they do. I don't think in any conception that sending that much money is something that they're okay with. Especially when this country, if this country was perfect, fair enough. If this country wasn't taking an economic hit, fair enough. They wouldn't care. Well, whatever. But that's not what we're presented with. We're presented with something else. We'll see. I have a tendency to think the economy always wins out. Wesley Walker. Oh, Wesley, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I totally appreciate it. All right, I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I am going to say subscribe. please, the black community will vote where the women tell them to. Adam, it doesn't work that way. As an African American, I'm telling you, it doesn't work that way. It's far more straightforward. There's a historical context. The historical context matters. Yes, the people are young, but those people are learning all sorts of things from their elders. And all things being equal, a lot of the knowledge that you get when you're a kid is implicit. It's not something where we need you to go. It's not that. There's all sorts of shit that we do that is basically soaked into us from our parents. Parents didn't have to tell us. We were just around them, and as kids picked up certain attributes that many times we don't even know. Like certain mannerisms and certain things or habits that you do, things that you believe about the world. A lot of that stuff is just implicit soaking that you soaked into. Voting is one of those things. Voting is one of those things, especially if you're not into politics. And so most of the public is not necessarily into politics like that. And so when they go to vote, we're voting to keep the monsters at bay. The monsters are in the other party. They understand the Southern strategy, even if they don't necessarily understand it in its entirety and its context. They understand that the certain legislation that was passed basically pushed certain people into certain party. And in their heads, this is the party that keeps the monsters at bay. If the monsters get into office, they're going to pass policy that is going to be against our interests, keep the monsters at bay. In their heads, Democrats is that party. Meaning, regardless of what Democrats provide, regardless of what they do, regardless of how horrible they are, regardless that they don't necessarily pass things that would benefit that particular community, in their heads, this is the party that keep the monsters at bay. Even if they don't do anything, at least they're not necessarily doing anything against me overtly. That's the thought process. That is why it will be damn difficult for Republicans to basically make inroads. If you're going to make inroads, it's going to have to be something that basically gets across that you are not the monster that you think they are. Problem is, every policy that the Republicans espouse and the shit that they say, especially from the standpoint of the edges of the party, goes against that thought. You could do it. It's doable, especially using economics, considering the way Democrats have acted. But you will have to do something that is against orthodoxy of the Republican Party. It will be in your best interest to do that, especially if you want to make inroads. I don't see it happening. So we'll see. I would say like, I would say share, and I would say subscribe.